So we've been working with the Brahma Viharas all year long. And I love that, that we've dedicated so much time to each of the Brahma Viharas, because they really are worth our care and our attention. I think in insight communities, there can be a slight preference for what are called the wisdom teachings or the wisdom practices. So the practices around emptiness, practices around awareness, practices around developing concentration and the teachings around that. And those are all very, very important. But we forget that the Brahma Viharas are wisdom teachings in themselves, that each of these responses of the heart are an expression of a free heart and mind. So a heart that is free of greed, aversion, and delusion, whether that's temporary, and you've all experienced this, where reactivity is abated within your heart and mind. And what's available is the heart's responsiveness. And what comes through is metta. There is this basic friendliness. When that metta touches suffering or pain or difficulty, or just the dukkha nature in terms of impermanence, what comes through is the heart's compassionate response, wanting to bear witness to that which is painful, or if we have the capacity to actually soothe and alleviate difficulty and pain. And when that friendliness of the heart meets someone's good fortune or beauty, it celebrates that. Yeah? There's wisdom in that. There's the wisdom of the free heart just responding to life. And now we come to equanimity, which is totally intimate with all of life, right? It's connected to, it's intimate with, it knows the dukkha nature of life. It knows the joys of life. It knows the gain and the loss, the sorrow and the joy. So equanimity is in touch, intimate with all life. And there's this steadiness. It doesn't move into trying to push the pain away. It doesn't lean into that which is joyful to try to get it to be sustained and to try to keep it and cling on to it, hold it. It's just steady. It allows the joy to move through. It allows the difficult to move through. It even allows the neutral. And it's just steady, non-reactive. I have a teacher who likens, there's a really fun image that he uses, and he likens each of the Brahma Viharas to each of the strings of a ukulele, the 4 strings of a ukulele. And when we take them up singly in the order that we have, we really tap into the specific flavor of each one. So metta, this basic friendliness, this basic warmth, basic human warmth, compassion, alleviating suffering where we can. Mudita, celebrating good fortune and beauty. And then this equanimity, the balance amidst the ups and downs of life. And perhaps you can hear the relationality in it. Perhaps you can even feel or intuit the pleasant tone, the soothing tone within each of the Brahma Viharas. In order to tune a ukulele in a holistic way, the strings need to be tuned to each other. And similarly, we tune each of the Brahma Viharas with each other so that they stay in balance. The equanimity without compassion ceases to be equanimity. It becomes cool and distant, not in touch with life. Or metta and mudita without compassion, they lose their depth and can start to feel pretty superficial. So an image that's been coming to me for the Brahma Viharas, which it's so interesting when we give ourselves over to practice and how idiosyncratic in particular our language becomes, or the images that come up. And you want to honor those and listen to those. Yeah. Because it's your heart really responding to the practice and finding its organic way into the practice. So an image that's been arising for me with all four Brahma Viharas is actually equanimity's at the center, sharing all of its gifts and all of its wisdom with compassion and mudita, so that the wisdom of equanimity as it moves into compassion supports compassion in not collapsing into overwhelm or despair or fatigue. And then equanimity, as it shares its gifts with mudita, it keeps it from flying into exuberance. There's a way that we can get enticed, overly fascinated with the pleasant Vedana of mudita, and we start to what's the word? We just start to, as I said, get over fascinated with the pleasant feeling of mudita, and we fall in love with how good mudita feels as it suffuses the heart and mind, and we cease to be connected to someone's good fortune, someone's joy, and it moves into exuberance and elation, right? The wisdom of equanimity says this has a shelf life. It has a beginning, middle, and end. This is impermanent. And that can be the wisdom teaching of equanimity that helps to ground mudita, so that we're not blown sky high into exuberance. Okay? So the image, equanimity at the center, sharing its gifts of balancing compassion and equanimity, or compassion and mudita. And then all three of these Brahma Viharas are held in a field of metta, this basic human warmth, holding and protecting equanimity, protecting compassion, protecting mudita, protecting and informing. Right? As I mentioned earlier, when there's this field of human warmth suffusing the heart mind, when it touches suffering, compassion moves through. When metta, this friendliness, touches the goodwill and good fortune of another being, mudita arises. And then there's equanimity at the center, balance, totally intimate with all of life, touched by pleasant and unpleasant contacts, as the suttas talk about, but not reactive, steady. So just some more reflections on equanimity. So the equanimity, there are two words in Pali that are used to flesh out two of the heart responses of equanimity. So one is upekkha, which has connotations of looking over. This wise perspective that comes from having an aerial view of a situation. And this aerial view helps us to see how things have come to be, right? So a recurrent theme in the suttas is one who sees dependent arising sees the Dhamma, one who sees the Dhamma sees dependent arising. So dependent arising expressed in very simple terms, simply says, when this is, this comes to be. When this arises, this arises. When this is not, that is not. When this ceases, that ceases. So the scholar Bhikkhu Bodhi describes dependent arising as the principle that whatever comes into existence does so in dependence on condition. Equanimity helps us to see this dependent arising, helps us see like, oh, well, these are the conditions that were in place that resulted in this arising. Oh, and these are the things that when they started to dissipate and disband, these conditions, these circumstances, these events, oh, that's what resulted in the disbanding, the disintegration of this particular event. And when we come to see how things have come to be, because we're seeing all of the conditions involved, we don't take it so personally. It's one of the reasons I really enjoy reading Toni Morrison. And although she's been gone for, gosh, 5 years now, she's still with us. I remember I had a dream, and I remembered asking her in this dream with a lot of ache in my heart, how did this whole thing around race here in the United States come to be? How did that come to be? All of our collective habits around, well, this is who's better, and this is who is subordinate. This is who's worthy of these resources. These are the people who aren't worthy of resources. Like, how did this come to be? And how did we come to believe that certain people were endowed with certain qualities just based on the color of their skin? How did this all come to be? And in the dream, she wrote me this very long letter, beautiful long letter. And when I woke up from the dream, I couldn't remember the contents of the letter. But it took me some time to realize, like, oh, she wrote not only you, but all of us this long, beautiful letter in all of her novels, Beloved, Sula, Jazz, all these, A Mercy, all these beautiful works exploring, like, how did race come to be? How did this construct come to be? And when you see, like, oh, this is how this construct came into being, it's not so personal, right? Sometimes it lands in my heart very personally. My mother and I just drove from California to St. Louis, returning to, my mom's returning to our ancestral home. My grandmother and my grandfather were raised here in St. Louis. And on the way, we experienced some challenges around race. So in those moments, it feels personal. But when I can call on equanimity and just remember, like, oh yeah, you put some greed, aversion, and delusion around the significance and meaning of skin color in order to kind of establish power and maintain power, you get systemic racism. And it's like, and I'm not condoning some of the things that my mother and I experienced on this trip, but what becomes clear is we've all been acculturated to certain views, to certain ways of being. And although we're responsible for the views that we carry and how they shape the way we treat each other, the things we say to each other, the actions we take, it's a recognition that it couldn't have been any other way given the conditions here in the United States. So what comes in, what gets ushered in from this understanding of having the perspective that comes from having an aerial perspective, oh, this is how things have come to be. Yeah. What gets ushered in is this other aspect of equanimity. It's called Tatra Majatata. Tatra Majatata, it's a mouthful, but it simply means standing in the middle of this. standing in the middle of things. And what is that which we're standing in the middle of? It's our lives. It's the 8 worldly winds blowing through. It's the gain and the loss. It's the joy and the sorrow. It's the praise and the blame. It's the collective positive regard and the collective disregard. Sometimes it's called fame and disrepute, but I like to think of it, it's a group favoring you or falling out of disfavor with a large setting. So from this aerial perspective and seeing like, oh, this is how things have come to be. What comes in, what gets ushered in is this tatra majatata, like this balance, this capacity to actually stay balanced amid the ups and downs of a life, amid the worldly winds that are blowing through the heart and the mind. And that takes responsiveness, right? It takes balance. So equanimity, one of the misperceptions or misconceptions about equanimity is that it's indifferent, that we're not in touch with the purity of life. But in order for equanimity to be genuine, in order for us to maintain this balance, we are intimate with these winds that blow through, and we all know them, right? This last piece around balance with the joys and sorrows of life that blow through the heart and mind, blow through our lives, blow through the minds and lives of people that we really care about. This peace that's possible, again, can sound like we're indifferent, but we're not. I think there's a belief that when we encounter the difficult, that if we don't react, that somehow we're indifferent, that we're not connected, and that we don't care, right? That if we look on the Ukraine and look on the state of politics in the world right now, and the divisiveness, and that if we're not upset, it means that we don't care. That somehow outrage should be commiserate with our depth of care. But that's not true. When equanimity is present, we still care. Equanimity is filled with metta. It's filled with compassion. It's filled with mudita. But the care is informed by wisdom, a wisdom of equanimity that sees, if I add my outrage to this situation, it's just gonna inflame and confuse an already heart-wrenching situation. The peace is the result of non-reactivity. And when the heart mind is clear of reactivity, we can take action that actually doesn't, as I said, inflame an already challenging situation. When there's an absence of reactivity and all 4 Brahma Viharas are firing within the heart mind, we can take action that actually calms the situation. We can take action that helps to broaden people's perspective. When there's tension in the room and we're the one person with all of the Brahma Viharas firing, we can have a positive impact. These Brahma Viharas are, in the suttas, they talk about them as radiating. And you know this, you've been with people who say this metta is just flowing through them, and it impacts your own heart and mind. You start to feel your own friendliness, start to feel your heart and your body. It's the beautiful thing about these Brahma Viharas. They're described as limitless, abundant, exalted, meaning that they have no limit, that they're not confined to one particular person or situation. They just radiate and bless outward, blessing everyone that they come in contact, touching every situation that they're in. No preference. There's no preference involved in the Brahma Vihara. Just blessing and touching and soothing ourselves, other people, the circumstances we find ourselves in.